So looking at our 55th part here on Wild Harvest Edibles from Thou Preparest a Table Before Me. And tonight's topic will begin with just an important note that as you navigate any health challenge, it's always recommended that you partner with a medical practitioner that shares your philosophy of the care of the human body, both in health and disease. And what we're sharing here tonight is just information in your toolbox for maintaining health, as well as from getting well if you need to, and always investigate or verify any treatment or protocol or procedure for yourself, not blindly accepting anything without due diligence. Thomas Edison said that the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human frame and diet and in the cause and prevention of disease, which in a way sounds a lot like what was said in 1885 in Counsels on Diets and Foods from the Word of the Lord through Ellen White, saying there are many ways of practicing the healing art, but there's only one way that heaven approves. God's remedies are the simple agencies of nature, not the complex ones, the simple agencies of nature that will not tax or debilitate the system through their powerful properties. There are some complex natural agencies that do tax and debilitate the system. Pure air and water, cleanliness, a proper diet, purity of life, and a firm trust in God are remedies for the want of which thousands are dying. Yet these remedies are going out of date because their skillful use requires work that the people do not appreciate. Fresh air, exercise, pure water, and clean, sweet premises are within the reach of all with but little expense. But drugs are expensive, both in the outlay of means, that is money, and the effect produced upon the system. And we have to take care of our soul, our spiritual being too, because if it is out of kilter, the rest of us can be out of kilter too. Beloved, I pray that you may be prosper in all things and be in health just as your soul prospers, is the admonition of John, 3 John 1:2. Romans 12:1-2, Paul says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So our first thing that we're looking at tonight is called Lapsana. Its common name is Nipplewort. But it's an interesting plant. It's an annual or biennial. We have it growing as a weed in our yard, and we had it when we lived in another house as well. It can grow up to 3.5 feet high, so it can get quite tall. Fairly spindly flower stem with lots of yellow flowers up on its terminal end, spreading to the ends. It's branching. It has a reddish green stout supporting stem, so it can kind of vary a little bit. It's hairy, and there's a slight ridge that's present along it, and it becomes more and more present as it gets towards the bottom or the basal end of the plant. You can see the small flowers there at the top as well as on the left and the buds, and the little ray flowers there in the lower right, and the seeds at the end, because it does kind of have it's an Asteraceae family, so it has that little dandelion-like seed tuft that will eventually show up as well. So the flower is composite, as you can see, and yellow, up to 1.5 inches long. And the flower stalk supporting the stem is round. So there's a ridge on the lower stem, but the flower stalks up at the terminal ends are more round in nature, or what we call botanically terete, T-E-R-E-T-E. So there's 18 to 20 spreading mini ray flowers, and it blooms midsummer to fall. So right now is a great time to see it. It's coming up, and you can eat it like spinach. It's just very, very common and easy to harvest. The lower leaves can be 6 inches long and 2.5 inches wide. They're one large leaf, oval, and then opposite-sided lobes towards the basal end. You can see those little opposite-sided lobes on the same leaf. So the upper leaves are alternate and smaller and fewer, so as you go up the stem. So the young leaves and the shoots are edible. This is a great picture of it on the left. The young leaves and shoots just coming up. There's no flower stalk presenting yet, but those are edible. The young shoots and leaves are best harvested prior to the flowering stem's appearance. It kind of has a radish-like flavor, and you can eat it raw or cooked. You can soak it in salted water. It's not required, but it adds some flavor. and for 10 to 15 minutes prior to cooking. And that adds some texture as well as flavor, and you're going to get the benefits of the minerals from the salt. So you can see in the lower right picture the reddish nature of the stem and how the flowers, as it moves up, are more alternate and going around the stem than they are opposite down at the basal rosette. So there's a weed lasagna that can be made. It's kind of a spring recipe. 2 cups of young leaves mixed with the nippleweed or lapsana, dandelion, spinach, or milk thistle. And the milk thistle is going to be, or any other kind of thistle too, when it's really, really young, the stems are pliable and the cooking will help make it pliable too. Soak that 10 to 15 minutes in cold salt water, and then dry it and chop it, season it with salt and oregano, and then crumble in 4 cups of tofu. And then you're going to layer the tofu and the weeds, layer them with tomato sauce first in the pan, just kind of create a layer that doesn't stick to the pan. Use a nonstick pan preferably, and put your noodle layer in. And it can be like lasagna noodles, or it can just be, we often use more of a, I don't know, penne or something like that, kind of a noodle. Whatever you have works. And then layer in the greens and the tofu crumble, put tomato sauce in between the layers. You can make a nutritional yeast layer or make a cheesy sauce that's made out of 2 cups of cashews that have been soaked, red bell pepper, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast that have been blended together and then added in there, drizzled in between the layers. And then bake that at 350 for an hour. So you can see on the right, the lower right there, you can see the presentation of the lapsana coming up. It's starting to shoot up a stem there that eventually will have that flower that's presented on the left side. So that's a way to use some good spring greens in your pasta and in your lasagna, and add a nutritional antioxidant punch to it. So some medicinal uses. It has historic use in the British Isles as a breast poultice for sore nipples and nursing mothers. As a poultice there's kind of the milky sap. Wort means plant in German and English, and it's also known as Nipplewort or breast leaf or good leaf. So you can see the lower right, they've put it over some noodles. They've cooked it up, wilted it, they call it, and put it over some noodles with maybe some garlic and a piece of bread there or something. So again, you're not eating the flowers or the buds, but you're focusing on the new early greens that are coming up in the spring. The next flower is one that is one of my favorites when I'm hiking in the Cascades. It's called Pearly Everlasting. And I was unaware that it actually had some medicinal and edible usages. It's called Anaphyllus margaritaceae. There we go. It's a flowering perennial, so it comes back year after year. It's a great plant because it's drought tolerant. It prefers full sun, dry, rocky, and poor soil. Those are kind of good characteristics for something that's resilient. It's common through North America and Asia, and it can grow up to 4 feet tall on erect stems. And in fact, it can grow in quite large areas of it, and also kind of more solitary depending on how it's growing in the wild. As the summer progresses, it comes onto dry and brittle stems, and that white flower will just dry and stay white and pretty. And you can take it home and it stays white and pretty for a very long time. And when you touch it early in the summer, it'll be, fleshy because it's green or new, but later on it actually is dry and kind of straw-like. But it maintains that appearance of that upper picture there. And that's why it's called Pearly Everlasting. The flowers are small, they can be yellowish to whitish, and they're at the top of the plant. The leaves are narrow and linear or lanceolate shaped. So it's kind of the long, narrow shape terminology from botany, and 3 to 5 inches long. So they alternate leaves on the stem, one per node, and then the have tiny white hairs all over it. And the leaves can be woolly from the tiny hairs. So the leaves, the stems, and the entire plant can be eaten cooked. So that includes the blossom, the leaves and the stems, and even the roots to some degree. So harvesting it, you can harvest the whole plant, cook the leaves. You can make some medicinal teas from the flowers, and it's easy to dry. It just dries naturally and just becomes just touch it and it kind of feels like paper on top. you can use it dried or fresh plants. So here's a couple pictures of that. Looks like Mount Baker in the background there. Maybe it's Mount Adams, but the Pearly Everlasting in the foreground, and the terminal bud on the right, and individual flowers. They're just very tiny. You kind of get that yellow look from the pollen bearing centers there and the petals around the outside. But it then dries out into this just paper-like dried flower that doesn't lose its color, and it just looks pretty even though it's dry late in the season. So it has a number of different botanical properties that are beneficial for medicinal usages. So you can use the entire plant. It's actually a painkiller, so an anodyne, antiseptic. So it's antimicrobial, helps to prevent infection. It's astringent in nature. So if you have a wound, it can help draw tissue together, kind of prevents additional bleeding. It also functions as an expectorant. So it aids mucus expulsion when used, typically as a tea. It has some sedative qualities. It can be used as a sleep aid, and it also induces sweating, diaphoretic. The Native Americans have a history of using it to treat tuberculosis and expel worms in the Pacific Northwest. The Chippewa used it kind of smoked with mint. I believe that's what smudged means, for paralysis. They also used the whole plant tea wash for wound care. That makes sense with the astringent and antiseptic natures of it, as well as the anodyne or pain-killing qualities that it has. The Mohawk Indians used the flower tea, specifically the flowers, for asthma. And today it has antihistamine qualities that are looked for and utilized in it. So a bronchial tea made of the Pearly Everlasting. You can use 1 to 2 slices of fresh ginger root. And, you know, if you're in the wild, if you can find wild ginger, we've talked about that in the past. Wild ginger could be substituted for the culinary varieties of ginger that we see today in the store. 1 teaspoon of Pearly Everlasting flowers or leaves, or both. 1 teaspoon of pine needles, and 1 cup of boiling water. Then cover and steep that in boiling water for 30 minutes and strain it. And you can drink a half a cup 3 times a day as needed. So you can see that there's a jar there with that steeping there in the window. Could be making some sun tea there too. And then the flowers that have been cut and dried there in the plant on the lower right picture. The next one is a pineapple weed. Pineapple weed is also known as Metricaria discoidea, and it's interesting that it's also known as wild chamomile, although chamomile is a different plant. The pineapple weed has the very similar properties to chamomile, can be used in the same way. It's very low growing. We have it growing in our driveway. That's where it likes to grow. It likes to grow in rocky soils, edges of walkways, along buildings, disturbed places and roads, and prefers a compact rocky soil. So another really resilient plant, and actually just walking on it sends the seeds or reseeds it around. It has a leafier foliage than chamomile and no petals. So the upper picture is how it presents itself. It has no white petals, nothing to show for itself. That's why it's called pineapple weed, because it looks a little bit like a pineapple. The lower picture is chamomile. So essentially the same plant, only it's not as leafy, and it has the white petals, more like a daisy. So that's how you can tell the pineapple weed. Another thing about the pineapple weed is it has a pineapple-like scent when crushed. So chamomile is also quite pungent, but the pineapple weed has kind of a pineapple scent to it. So single cone-shaped flower heads at the end of the stems. Looks like they can branch there too, up to a 1/2 inch in diameter at the end of the branches. And the disc flowers are the only flowers that are present. So that's in the central portion. There's no ray flowers or petals on pineapple weed. So the leaves can be up to 3/4 of an inch wide, 2 inches long. You can see they're very feathery and smooth, deeply branching, so deep lobes in them, very narrow segments, almost fern-like looking, and mostly hairless, or what we call glabrous is the term that's used botanically. Sweet smelling leaves when they're crushed. The leaves and the flower heads are what are primarily used from a culinary standpoint, from an edibility standpoint. Harvest at the base of the flowers or pinch off the flower heads. Can be eaten raw, just eat it raw as a trail snack, or steep it whole or in parts for teas. And the leaves can be eaten cooked or raw. So a syrup you can make, gather the flower heads and put it in a pan, cover the water with water and simmer for 6 minutes, and then strain and retain the liquid. And then you can add 1 cup of sugar. You could maybe substitute honey for that if you like, per cup of tea, and then warm it to dissolve it. And you can use that as a dressing or for a sweet drink. Another thing that you can do, or a way of using it, is pineapple weed tea. So a 1/2 cup of fresh pineapple weed leaves, add 2 cups of boiling water, and then turn it down. Let it simmer for 15 to 20 minutes. And then once you've got it initially started there, let it steep for another 10 to 20 minutes after that, after simmering it. So the longer you let it steep, the longer you simmer it, the stronger it's going to be. So you can drink it hot or cold. So it could be like like an iced tea kind of a thing. You could put it in the fridge and keep it. And it can be stored for a period of time and aliquoted out and used as you desire. So some medicinal usages. It's a calming herb. It's great for anxiety, headaches, stomach cramps, irritable bowel syndrome, which was noted in Schofield in 2003. Also for gastrointestinal upset, has some benefits for that, as well as fevers, menstrual pain relief, UTI issues. Also helpful for colic relief in kids, even young kids. It's just really safe. And then help to ease teething pain. So that's infants again, young children are going to benefit from that. Because of its anodyne nature, that is its pain killing qualities. It can be helpful for the teething. In the Middle Ages, it was used in soup as a soup staple, and then also used as a home deodorizer, because as it's on the floor in a house with just a rock floor or an earthen floor, as they would tread around on it, it would release the clean smelling scent into the home. So it also has carminative properties, anti-spasmotic properties, which is around muscles, anti-gas, which I think is the same thing as carminative, helps prevent heartburn, and is a nerve soothing agent. So the pineapple weed heads, the flowers, you can see in the palm of the hand there, you can see it growing on a flower by the basket that's being harvested. They are really quite abundant, so it's actually quite easy to harvest a quantity of it fairly quickly. And where it grows, it does tend to grow quite abundantly and well. It has a very wide range across the United States, North America, Canada, just not present in Texas, Florida, and the Gulf states there, other than Louisiana. Just one thing to keep in mind, many of these flowers we've talked about are in the Asteraceae family, and there are some people who are allergic to plants in the Asteraceae family. You can tell an Asteraceae because they have that disc flower, and they have petals that are like a sunflower going out around the outside edges, and that present in different ways there. So they have disc flowers, which is all that pineapple weed has, and then they have the ray flowers that emanate out and like sunbeams out around the central disc flower. So to review this, you can go to preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com and also take a look at some of the other plants that we have looked at over the time there as well.